Deep below ancient kingdoms, lush jungles, and centuries of history, something divine and ancient is stirring. This titan is creation. It is destruction. He is Progenitus. This is the five-headed Hydra god of Alara, Magic the Gathering's fragmented plane, an avatar of all 5 mana types, the first creature ever printed with protection from everything. Progenitus is an absolute legend in the lore of Magic, and I just needed to learn more about what's actually the deal with him. And lucky for me, I didn't have to do too much research for this one because one of my team members, Peyton, loves Hydras in Magic the Gathering and was absolutely ready to teach me everything there is to know about the greatest Hydra of all time. Progenitus Origins. To fully explain to you how Progenitus fits into the crazy lore of the plane of Alara, I kind of first need to break down for you how Alara actually works. Since Progenitus is so heavily tied to one fragment of the plane, it then sort of becomes the vessel of ruin for the plane later on during its life cycle. And that's because Alara is a very unique plane that, during its initial big run, was split into 5 shards, which were essentially these mini planes with only 3 mana colors each. But it turns out that the plane wasn't always split like that. Before there were shards, before there were divided philosophies and these isolated ecosystems, there was just Alara. One world, fully balanced, where all 5 mana colors, white, blue, black, red, and green, just coexisted. Now that was all fine and dandy until some random planeswalker destroyed the entire plane, splitting it into 5 shards during an event known as the Sundering. Okay, so that makes sense, right? On Alara, the embodiment of all 5 colors is a 5-headed Hydra god avatar named Progenitus. He was super big and scary, and then at some point, the 5 shards were split by a third-party planeswalker, and each of these 5 shards, Bant, Esper, Grixis, Junt, and Naya, each now only have 3 mana colors each. Now, just to be clear, this didn't end up splitting up Progenitus as well. He was still one really big guy with all 5 mana colors, but it's just important to know that he's at full power when Alara is also whole, not fragmented. Those last parts about him being at full power when Alara is fully fused and the fact that each shard only has 3 mana colors is actually important to the tale of Progenitus more than anything else, honestly. So now that you have some context here, let's finally punch in on one of these shards, Naya, home of a Johnny Goldmane, by the way, and we can see how the full tale of Progenitus unravels here. This is because Naya is the shard of life, of abundance, of reverence for nature and the massive, awe-inspiring creatures that roam its jungles. It's filled with red, white, and green mana, full of gargantuan creatures and an ancient race of elves known as the Cylian elves. And Naya, most importantly, is the one shard that actually worships Progenitus. As a creature and a force of nature, they truly revere it, unlike the other shards that straight out fear it. To the Cylian elves, Progenitus is both the origin and the sustainer of all life. Every vine that curls around a tree, every gargantuan beast that shakes the jungle floor with its footsteps, every pulse of life that surges through Naya, it all traces back in some way to the sleeping Hydra slumbering beneath the earth. So he's not just a god that created the world, he's a god that continues to be in the world still, and like he did in a past era, he was bound to destroy it once again. Progenitus and the anima Cylia. So, since I know that you're curious about this, let's actually go back to that past era during the Sundering period that I was just talking about. Here, we meet a figure known as the First Anima. Now, the Anima, for all intents and purposes, is kind of like the Avatar in the Nickelodeon series Avatar: The Last Airbender. You should be familiar as an MTG fan. There's a Last Airbender collab set after all. The Anima is like a super druid tied to every creature of Naya and was said to be the only figure able to to quell and commune with Progenitus. And that anima was originally a young shaman named Cylia, who, as you may have guessed, is the reason that the Cylian elves are connected to Progenitus to begin with. Cylian elves, Cylia, you kind of see the vision here, right? So before the shards, before the world was ever fractured, Progenitus wasn't just sleeping beneath the world, he was the world in a much more complete, much more terrifying way. Still a badass Hydra at his core, but at this point, nobody really knew that because he was a unified form of all 5 mana colors on the plane since it had not been split yet. And around the time that this random planeswalker showed up to split Alara, Progenitus got sick and tired of just creating everything. He was this all-powerful god, and creation wasn't cutting it anymore. So instead, he opted to flip the coin and see how things were on the other side, so he embraced destruction. In a divine display of power, Progenitus unleashed 5 catastrophic forces upon the world. Wildfires scorched the land, earthquakes began to split civilizations, windstorms with intense gales ruptured the skies, devastating floods drowned all in their path, and something far worse, the emptiness of the void storm began to consume all that remained. Progenitus was the top dog, and he was making it very clear to Alara that they bent to his will. But while everyone else ran, hid, or died, the young shaman Cylia climbed a mountain with nothing but a vial of poison, a dagger, and a dream. Cylia begged for Progi's wrath to please stop. She just wanted things to be chill, but Progenitus was not really in his chill arc right now. He was in his anti-chill arc, so he just blinded the girl and turned around to watch his cleansing. Kind of a dick move if you ask me, but also I guess when you're an all-powerful god being hellbent on resetting everything, a little girl telling you to please stop is kind of annoying. However, that's of course not where things end, because Cylia defied God a second time. You see, in losing her sight, Cylia gained something else. She stopped seeing the world because, well, she's blind now, but she started perceiving what lies underneath it instead. The connections between living things, the threads tying existence itself together. And somewhere within that web, she finds it. A single connection, a thread linking her to Progenitus. So Cylia takes her dagger, dips it into the poison, which was now mixed with her own blood, and throws the dagger at the essence of Progenitus himself. Sick girl, go get your get back for being blinded. Now, in that fateful moment, Progenitus actually breaks. He doesn't die, he's way too big and powerful for that, but he still breaks. Progenitus' unified form fractures, his divine essence scattering, collapsing into something physical, something tangible, something that could exist in the world now it was trying to destroy. That thing being the 5-headed giant Hydra that we know and love today. Each single head now embodying a single color of mana, something you can actually see way clearer here on the Magic Foundations number 431 art you see right here. You can actually see how the necks of each head kind of have the different colors of mana on them. Now, don't get me wrong, the sick OG horror art is absolutely rad, but it's a lot clearer what's actually going on with him after the sundering in this close-up art instead, I think. What really matters here, though, is that not all 5 are actually acting in perfect unity. A being that was once whole was now divided, slightly. I mean, he was still a divine god, but there was a secondary force at play here that prevented this full destruction from happening now. That thing being that pesky planeswalker who caused the sundering. Now, the reason I said it was important earlier is that while this Progenitus reveal happened, the shards were also split. And in a perfect circumstance, because this event took place on Naya, where there was now only red, white, and green mana, the 2 heads representing blue and black mana withered away as there was no mana of this type on Naya left. Why did this happen? I'm actually not certain, but I'm guessing that since Big P here is the mana avatar of Alara, those heads were only allowed to manifest on the shard that was tethered to that part of Alara. Now this of course feels like a very specific Progenitus weakness with the Sundering, not a universal thing for anyone using those types of mana on the plane of Naya. But the other thing that happened here was that Cylia's bloodline then became connected to Progenitus itself for the rest of time, and thus the true role of the anima was formed, and they kept the titanic beast slumbering beneath Naya for literal centuries. The soul of the world returns. Alrighty, now we get to talk about how sick it is when Progenitus finally reawakens. Isn't that hype? Speaking of hype, if you're on mobile and watching this video, could you try swiping over on the like button and hitting the hype button? I kinda wanna see how it plays out and if it actually helps grow the channel. It seems to have worked for Elish Norn. That video went kinda crazy, but you know, who knows if it was actually that or if it was just the very cool thumbnail. Ooh. Back now to the big Hydra god though, round 2. Here's how everything went down. For literal generations, everything was kind of peachy keen. Progenitus slept, the jungle grew, all while the Cylian elves watched, interpreted, and maintained this incredibly fragile balance between worship and containment. Until the Second Stirring. 15 years before the Great Conflux, which I'll get into in just a moment, there was a brief period where the Great Progenitus was rumbling. What that basically means is that he started to wake up, the forest seemingly began to unravel, and the then anima, probably some dude named Derek, I don't know, was tethered to Progi, and the elves made a ton of sacrifices to try and keep him at bay. Whew, sick. Good for Naya, good for Alara, is what I would have said if he didn't lock in and come back 15 years later during the Conflux. Enter Mayael, the current anima that carried that responsibility more than anyone. Through the ritual of white cover gaze, she didn't just see the world, she also understood the layers beneath, the same thing that Cylia saw after she was first blinded. But she also saw the problem with Alara and became aware for the first time that Naya, as she had known it, was never actually whole to begin with. The other shards still existed. Bant, Esper, Grixis, Jund, entire worlds running in parallel, each one incomplete in their own way. Alara was already naturally reforming, but Nicol Bolas, the planeswalking crazy elder dragon god, was hellbent on getting his power back, and he sped up this process even more. He came and destroyed the obelisk anchors, keeping the shards apart, speeding up this conflux, which is kind of just the fancy term used to describe the Alaran shards slowly reuniting. Progenitus was waking slowly and summoned the anima, Mayael. They discussed briefly what was going on right now, and Progenitus, in a honestly very sweet way, almost was trying to speak with Cylia, unaware of her passing, since, you know, homeboy here had no idea how long it had been since we were sealed away, like millennia ago at this point. But before they could really get into the nitty-gritty here, Bolas hopped into the conversation, pretending to be Progenitus, and caused Mayael to lead her own elves into war against Sarkhan Vol, one of Bolas's own minions, for a different part of his big old scheme. Fun little behind the scenes fact for you here, if you're watching this video the day that it drops, I was actually supposed to do a Sarkhan video today, but then instead I decided to slot in Progenitus, you know, to try something a little bit new. Just a little inside baseball for you as a loyal viewer. Anyhow, the 5 shards of Alara slammed back together into one unified plane, violently forcing entire ecosystems, whole civilizations, and entire philosophies into direct contact with one another. And what that meant for Naya was the reawakening of Progenitus. You see, his body was there. He was on Naya, weakened and unable to become truly alive again since there was no black or blue mana. But then, the shards of Bant and Jund crashed into Naya, intertwining their black and blue mana respectively, once again bringing all 5 mana colors to Naya before all the shards fused into Alara once again. And that brief window was all that Progenitus really needed to arise and return to his former glory. The 5-headed Hydra surged into the sky, massive, beyond comprehension, each head now fully restored, each aspect of mana burning within him once again, no longer withered, no longer incomplete. Nicol Bolas had also achieved his goal of creating a massive storm, the Maelstrom of Alara, but quite frankly, his plan ended up failing, and I don't really care because the soul of the world was back in action anyways. And so now, Progenitus is roaming New Alara, acting as a manifestation of its will and desire. Oh, and he also hangs out with a giant storm baby, a big fusion elemental, and an archangel, who are all almost as strong as him, but not quite. If you really care about learning how all that conflict stuff actually went down and how Nicol Bolas orchestrated everything, you can check out this video here where I break down his crazy story. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed these videos. Again, if you haven't hyped yet, please do. Curious if it works. Like, let's make this one go crazy too. And otherwise, really appreciate you watching. If you have any other wishes or criticisms or feedback, let me know, and I'll hopefully see you in the next video.